Hello, thanks for looking in on my video. I'm really grateful. Today I want to talk about a particular case to illustrate that recalls back to prison are not always necessary and that there are other ways that you can go. So I'm going to talk about one of my very first cases as a probation officer back in the day. And in those days, we used to we didn't probation didn't have the power to recall people. It was up to the court whether or not to revoke somebody's license. And I'm going to talk about a case where I actually asked the court not to revoke this chap's license. And I'm going to call him Philip. And I first met him in his early 20s. I think he was about 23, something like that. Quite a sad background, actually. He grew up in a care home, and some of his earliest memories at the care home were stealing sweets from the local shop. And he said that the kids there in the care home were up to all sorts of bad behaviour and criminality, stealing milk bottles off people's doorsteps, shoplifting. I think they even did joyriding, when they were teenagers or even younger. Very prolific, So when I met him, he was still quite obsessed, I think, in offending. And we had a good rapport, though. I kept working away. What was good back then is, I think now, some offenders will tell you, or ex-offenders tell you, is that they've chopped and changed probation officers quite a lot. Back in the day, they didn't really change so much unless a probation officer moved, or if somebody made a complaint about their probation officer. Now, it wasn't necessarily that uncommon, that they didn't get on. And quite often, I don't know how and why, but I was the one who's seen as the safe hands, and I used to get cases where people had complained about their probation officer. But my thing was to try and build a good and positive rapport with the ex-offender that I was working with. And I was really quite determined to help them not reoffend. And that's what I saw as my purpose in working as a probation officer. And I think over the years, the job has changed and it's become more about assessing risk and how do you protect the public from the risk and having responsibility for that. And files are seized if things go wrong. And it's made some people in probation a bit risk averse. And not only that, I think the police often are sort of on and on at probation to recall people. And I don't really like the system that there is now, and I don't think it should be up to probation alone to recall people. But I want in this to give a good news story of what can happen. And what was lovely back then was I had this guy for quite a few years, and I used to go, "Oh no, you've offended again. What on earth can we do to stop you? And come on, let's have a look at things differently." And sometimes people get fed up with being put down and told off all the time. And I was kind of saying, well, okay, let's look at what you're good at. Let's look at what your strengths are. Can't we get you doing some sort of work to do with your strengths? What can we do? What strategies can you do to stop getting out of trouble? But he seemed quite obsessed, actually, addicted to offending. And that was hard. Now, just to give you an example, and he was driving all the time illegally. And he had one of those those little Japanese type vans that are quite tall. He was driving around in this little Japanese van, and he was breaking into very rich people's garages, stealing their champagne, and stealing all their bicycles. And the police eventually got onto him. And when they raided his flat, they found the champagne. And all down the alleyways, different alleyways near his flat, they found lots and lots of bicycles. I mean, what was he going to do with these bicycles? He didn't seem to be trying to sell them or anything. It was like he was collecting them, and he had like 40 odd bicycles hidden down alleyways. He was addicted to offending. He got some sort of thrill out of it. The other thing he started doing at quite a young age was joyriding. And he quite liked driving illegally, and they got some sort of thrill and excitement out of driving. It's called joyriding, but it's taking a vehicle without consent. It's stealing a car, taking it for a spin, and sometimes even returning it to a neighbouring street from where they got it from, just for the excitement of driving. Sad, isn't it? So, and he got sentenced to jail for joyriding, and unfortunately, he met very sophisticated offenders in prison. They made contact with him. They realised that he was very clever and skilled at breaking into cars. So they invited him to join this criminal enterprise where they were car ringing, and they were stealing these cars. He was stealing cars to order, and serious offence this really. So stealing cars to order, nice cars and things. He was driving them to a certain location where they had their identities changed, and they had the engine number altered, the number plates altered, all that kind of thing. They were put into a shipping container and exported abroad, so it was quite involved. So after a while of doing all this sort of offending, he was caught again, and he ended up in prison. And I said, "Oh God, we've got to try and stop you. What can we do to stop you offending? We need to get you, we need to settle you down now, and you need to break all links with offenders and start a new life." And he said, "You know what? I really want to stop now." And I said, "Well, you need stability of address. What are you going to do? And you need to keep away from offending." He said, I've got back in contact with my sister. I haven't seen her for years. Our family was split due to very difficult circumstances, but I've got back in touch with her, and she's come to visit me at the prison, and she's agreed for me to go and live with her house, and her partner's agreed to try and help me get a job in the building trade. He's a builder. So I said, terrific. Fresh start in a new, slightly even a new different area. And so he came out of jail. He came to visit me, and we had this plan of, what sort of things he needed to do, like if he saw any of his old associates, to cross the road, not talk to him, or to be appropriately assertive with them and say, "Look, I'm not into offending anymore, I'm sorry." And to steer clear of it all, and break all contact with all his former friends, stick with his sister, behave at home, be helpful in her place, have a go at cooking occasionally, help with the washing up. And if you've got a job, to work hard at it, make sure you're on time, make sure, ask questions about the job, be interested in the work, and can I help you sort of attitude in the job, rather than not always wait to be told to do something, use his initiative, all these sort of tips we discussed. So, and he did it. And lo and behold, you know what? Whilst he's in prison, he'd been banned from driving, but his ban had finished. And he now had the opportunity to get a clean provisional driving licence. So I said, okay, this is great. So there was a driving school that I knew, and they were quite helpful with ex-offenders, and they knew the school, and I helped get him some driving lessons with this driving school, and they're really good. And I was pleased at last that he was doing positive things. He was behaving at home. His sister gave good reports about him. He was doing well at work. He was learning to drive properly and working towards becoming a legal driver. Anyway, the other thing I mentioned was when he came out of jail, I mean, it just shows you how obsessed he was, but he done me this massive, great big drawing of my car, and it was fantastic. The skill of it, I said, crikey. And it was a bit like, these professional illustrators. It was that kind of quality, or technical drawing. It was that standard. It was A1. So he'd done me this beautiful drawing, and I absolutely, I was gobsmacked. And it was on a great big poster size, big drawing. Must have taken him hours. And it was so neatly done and well done. And I said, Christ, what are you doing? This is fantastic. You should be doing this instead of offending all the time. So anyway, sadly, he reoffended. Well, despite all these good things going on, he was out one night and some policeman stopped him and knew him and was, I get the impression the police officer may have been winding him up a bit. And he told the police officer where to go. And he got arrested for breach of the peace, saying F off to the policeman and stuff like that. And back to court. And the court had power to recall him, to revoke his licence. And I made out the case. I said, look, I propose, let's defer sentence. So what it means was they weren't going to sentence him for 3 months, and that he would come back to court in 3 months' time. And during those 3 months, I proposed that he would be challenged to stay out of trouble, not reoffend. And the point was, with this breach of the peace, he'd never done anything like that before. All his previous offences were thefts. He'd never done breach of peace. He'd never done anything violent. So this sort of altercation with the police officer was a bit out of character, if anything. So it was different. So it's different if somebody's got loads of this going on, but it was new. So so there's that. So what we did, I proposed, we set him targets: stay out of trouble, not reoffend anymore, keep in employment, keep her in stable accommodation at his sister's, keep doing the driving lessons, and to take his driving test. So he had to do all those things during the 3 months. And do you know what? He did. So when he goes back to court, I wrote a report outlining all his progress, all the things he'd done. And the court actually said to him, well done, we're not going to recall you back to prison, and we're going to impose a financial penalty for your misbehaviour. So that was useful. And I was so impressed with him, So he changed jobs about then, and I was quite worried because he got a job with his mate who's an ex-offender, car valeting. So the car valeting was quite good, providing he stayed law-abiding, but he was addicted to cars and he absolutely loved the job, absolutely loved it, and really did a good job with his car valeting. And he was like a partner with his mate. But what worried me was his partner was an ex-offender. And I said, I'm not happy about you associated with an ex-offender. And he said, look, don't worry. This guy's different. He's done one serious offence, and he's done a serious offence, one-off offence and no other offending. And he didn't tell me what it was exactly. But he said he's done one set and he ain't going to repeat it. And he's stayed out of trouble for quite a while now, and he's not involved in anything like that. If anything, he's completely squeaky clean now. I said, well, that's really good. And we were sitting there talking about ways of building up, his car valeting, about doing leafleting, doing money off on the quieter days, so I had quite a nice positive time. And I said, do you know what you should do with your regular customers who, is to do them a nice, not a great big picture, but a little frame picture of their car, because you can do brilliant drawings. And that'd be a lovely free gift to your regular customers. Anyway, I was dead chuffed with him. He did really well. And he finished his licence with flying colours, did really well, and I didn't see him again. So anyway, I changed probation areas. I moved when my son was born to be nearer home, and I changed probation areas, and about 5 years later, I had this phone call and he tracked me down. He'd been ringing round trying to find out where I was working now. And he phoned me up and I said, "Oh, how you doing, Philip?" You know, I call him Philip, it's not his real name. But he said, "I'm just phoning you up to let you know, I thought you'd be pleased to know that I've managed to stay out of trouble. I'm still out of trouble. That I'm married now, I've got children, and things are going really well. And the car valeting's going brilliant. You know, even though he was in a new location, I think it was all going well. So out of bad can come good. And I hope you found it interesting. All the very best now, and best wishes to you. And thanks for sticking with me and watching this video. All the best now. Bye bye.